Okay, this is Simple Stats for STEM, and one of our first scenarios has to do with comparing the participants on their hours of sleep or their amount of sleep and their GPA. So this is just a general video here to show how to generate random numbers. You could go through and you could fill in a bunch of numbers if you wanted to, and you could just kind of make up some stuff as you go. We're talking about high schoolers here, so their amount of sleep would be of various amounts. But a quicker way to do that, and probably a little more mathematically sound way to do that, would be to do this with using generating random numbers. I've included the formula right here for generating the numbers of hours of sleep, and this formula is to generate a random number, and this formula is going to generate, first of all, a decimal. This formula here, rand, and the open and close parentheses, is going to generate a decimal value between 0 and 1, not including 0 or 1, and that is going to help us get some more granular data, give us a couple of decimals in there. But then I'm going to add on a random number between 4 and 8. And this is just kind of some guesswork here as far as hours of sleep go. I use 4 because I figure, most high schoolers are at least getting 4 hours of sleep a night, and probably none of them are surpassing much past 9 hours. So what this is going to do is it's going to take a random decimal between 0 and 1 and add it to a random number between 4 and 8, and it'll give me a valuation for the number of hours of sleep for each of these participants. So the first value is 8.8, so that's a pretty reasonable number of hours of sleep. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag that formula down, and it'll generate for me hours for 20 participants. So you'll see some of them are high, some of them are low. And but again, this is a little bit more scientific or mathematical, if you will, rather than just making up those values. Over here on GPA, and by the way, I want you to kind of keep an eye on these values. They're going to change here in a second, but I'm going to talk about how to keep that from happening. But to generate the GPA and some random values there, we're going to use same formula, but this time we're going to make just a little bit of a change. We're going to include our decimals, and we're going to add a random number between 1 and 3. A GPA, standard GPA, is between 1 and 4, but since I'm adding on this decimal value to as much as 3, I don't want to exceed 4. And so this will give me some GPA values between 1 and 4, and we'll start off with our first one now. As I calculate these values, I want you to watch this column over here. It's going to change, because on Google Sheets and in Excel, anytime you start dealing with random numbers, what they will do is they will recalculate anytime there's a calculation on the page. And so that can be kind of annoying, and we're going to fix that here real quick. But first, I'm going to change these GPAs. I'm going to limit them down to about, you'll see the evaluations just keep changing every time I make a change. I'm going to change that decimal place to 2 decimal places there. And then over here on sleep, I could change this if I wanted to include another decimal. The more precise, the better. So we'll just give them both 2 decimal places. And you'll notice that these changed again. They're still random values, but every time I make a calculation on this sheet, it's going to recalculate the random values. So to keep that from happening, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to highlight this column, and I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to do Control C, and I'm going to copy that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it over the top of itself. And so it'll be the same, it'll be new values, but this time you'll notice that, there should be no formula there. So, I see what I did wrong. Okay, so I'm going to copy that again, Control C. This time I'm going to right click and do Paste Special. And I want to paste the values only. So that's going to keep it from pasting in the formula. So you'll notice that when I click on the cell, there's just a number. There's no more formula. So that's not going to change every time now. I'll do the same thing with GPA. I'm going to copy that, Control C. Oh, I got to highlight the whole thing first. And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste values only. And that will give me now just these values. They're not going to change now because it's no longer a formula. So you can see up here, it's just giving me that decimal, and now it's no longer a formula. So I can calculate anything else on the page, and those values won't change. So now I have 20 values for sleep, and I have 20 GPA values. And so I'm ready to move on with my next analysis here in the next video. Thanks for watching.